Hi, I'm Don from DonDronesOn. The Aeronautical Information Manual, or AIM document, was updated recently. Here's a summary of the key changes for drone pilots. The Aeronautical Information Manual, or AIM, is a great reference for all pilots, both for manned aircraft and for RPAs. The AIM is updated twice a year and provides pretty readable interpretations of the Canadian aviation regulations, including those applicable to drones and RC aircraft. Changes from one edition to the next are highlighted with blue backdrops, making it very easy to find updates. The drone or RPA chapter is only 31 pages long, and I strongly recommend you read it. There's a link to the document in the description below this video. Now, frankly, I haven't been doing videos highlighting the changes in the AIM because the changes have been pretty minor recently and generally quite positive. But in this version, published on October the 3rd, 2024, there are 3 sections worth noting. An extensive section talking about parks and wildlife sanctuaries, the announcement of potential new RPA-only restricted zones, and finally, an attempt to clarify SFOC applications. Let's go through each one. The first one is right up front in the general information section of the RPA chapter, where they caution that there may be other restrictions on drone operations beyond the actual Part 9 RPAS rules. What they've added is a big chunk related to parks and wildlife. They start with national parks and national park reserves, stating that landings and takeoffs may only take place at specific locations and with permission. This is fairly well known. Surprisingly, though, they do not say anything about flying over national parks. I wish they would come right out and say whether we can or cannot. Then they bring up the migratory birds regulations, stating that landing or taking off in bird sanctuaries may, and they use the word may, require a permit, and they offer a web link. That link, however, actually covers both migratory bird sanctuaries as well as national wildlife areas. Both of these areas, and there's 149 of them altogether across Canada, require permits for landing and taking off. The website specifically mentions RPAs in their list of activities requiring permits. So again, I'm not sure why Transport Canada is, wishy-washy with the statement that we may require a permit for these areas. The website is crystal clear that we do. The third paragraph in this section suggests that information about the preservation of wildlife can be found on the NAV Canada AIP website. And they give the link. I've looked through all the AIP documents and I couldn't find anything about wildlife on that page. So I think they're completely messed up with this reference and it needs to be fixed. They finish off with a section about species at risk and marine mammal regulations. This was likely triggered by the recent news story about a drone operator being fined $30,000 for flying too close to a group of killer whales. They provide 2 links for further information and of course, how to get permits. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm actually glad to see they are highlighting these places and circumstances where drones may require permits. But I think they could have been more clear and specific about things like, flying over national parks. And really, these topics shouldn't be mushed up in the general information introduction, but rather integrated into the main body of the document where other flying restrictions are spelled out. Okay, moving on. The second major area of the AIM that has been updated is related to even more restricted areas. This whole section, 3.2.3.3, is new. It reminds us that operating a drone within 5 nautical miles or 9.3 kilometers of a forest fire area is prohibited, whether or not there is a NOTAM, notice to airmen, in place. Unfortunately, they've made it really muddled and full of unnecessary details instead of simply saying, stay the hell away from forest fires. And everywhere else in the RPA section of the AIM, whenever nautical miles are referenced, they provide the equivalent in kilometers for us normal people who work from the ground. In this crucial bit about forest fires, nope, they just say 5 nautical miles. And yes, by the way, I have offered my services as a fast editorial reviewer to catch this kind of sloppiness, but have been politely turned down. This section also mentions that NOTAMs can be raised for temporary no-fly zones, but again, it's written in a very confusing manner compared to the rest of the document. Their first example of a temporary restriction is a well fire. Really? Do we have a lot of well fire NOTAMs? I don't know. Maybe we do, but I've never seen one. Other than wildfires, the most common no-fly zone NOTAMs that I've seen are air shows and perhaps sporting events. This is very odd. But really the most interesting bit in this part of the AIM is the announcement that there will be a new section in the Designated Airspace Handbook, or DAH. This new section will be for drone-only no-fly zones initiated by a NOTAM but exceeding 90 days in duration. It also states that these RPAS-only restricted zones will be shown in NavDrone, and of course it'll be in Drone Pilot Canada, but they don't mention that, but will not be in regular aeronautical publications, presumably stuff like VNC charts. VNC charts, of course, are entirely useless for drone pilots, but we are required to be able to interpret them. Now they'll be officially insufficient, so I wonder if Transport Canada will quietly remove the requirement for drone pilots to understand them. Okay, aside from that, this section also mentions that, quote, permanent exemptions will be in place for all police, firefighting, and first responders RPA operations. And that's sensible. But I'm curious, what areas do they have in mind for these permanent RPA-only no-fly zones? My guess is that it will be places like nuclear power plants or maybe prisons that aren't already Class F restricted zones. Maybe national parks. I just hope they don't get overzealous with these new zones because it could become a major pain in the butt. DPAC has a meeting coming up with Transport Canada and we'll be asking about this one for sure. The third major section updated in this version of the AIM is 3.6.2, describing the Sfoc application process. A lot of tips and guidance are now provided directly in this section, which should make it easier to submit Sfoc applications. For example, it mentions that it is not necessary to contact Transport Canada if there's a change in pilot or spotter names. Just keep the normal flight log records. Good. But again, there's weird wording in some of the sections. See if you can untangle this one for the seemingly simple part called proposed period of RPAS operations. It says, planned start and end dates of RPAS operations, so far so good, up to a maximum of the first day of the 13th month following the date of issuance. I'm sorry, that is the weirdest and most complicated way to say, well, actually, I don't know what they're trying to say. They could have just said the maximum date range is a year, but I'm not sure that's what they're trying to say because it says it's till the first day of the 13th month following a date we don't even know in advance, the date of issuance of the Sfoc. Frankly, I think they would be better off just expanding the guidelines in the existing aviation circular, making them clear and in one place, rather than having some in the AIM and some in that circular document. It's kind of a mess. Anyways, that's all for now. I really recommend that you read the AIM documents RPA chapter for all the details. There's a link in the description down below. Thanks for watching.